Retro continues to grow bigger and better than ever, and few come as big, bad and bombastic as Sarah Connor, Cyberdyne Systems, Carl Reese and the Terminator. UK developer Bitmap Bureau have been slowly creating old, new games across modern and retro hardware, but their latest is a huge coup from them. Terminator 2 is a brand new 2D platformer that looks to have travelled into the future from the past, one that has struggled to match pixel quality to film. But this binary retro nostalgic new entry could rectify those long-standing wrongs. A love note to a lost era in movies and games, and a title that I just had to talk about some more following my database episode ahead of its multi-platform release in September this year. Come with me if you want to play.
Come on! What day is it? What year?
The Terminator was one of the most impactful and long-lasting stories in modern cinema. Not quite launching Arnold Schwarzenegger's career, but certainly pushing him higher into the public sphere. As much as it did for director James Cameron, far more than his infamous Piranha 2 debut. This B-movie horror sequel came from his days working for Roger Corman as a model and FX artist, and then later for John Carpenter on Escape from New York. But even following that, he was destined for bigger things, and the Terminator was a product of the 80s and its obsession on computers, androids, AI, and cyborg future mixed with nuclear war, acid rain, and Armageddon. The film was a hit, but the then blossoming video rental market helped this small independent film reach mass market and turn that tiny $6 million budget even then into tens of millions for Hemdale and Orion, two great studios. On a personal note, this was where I saw it first, at the video shop I worked at. It was an 18 here in the UK in 1985, as that rating had only recently been changed from the older X certificate. It later dropped to a 15 in the 90s. The movie was a popular rental for Rank Video. We had about 20 copies if memory serves at first when it was released. But I digress. The impact of Terminator in the low and high budget movie world was fast and strong. From the Italian Terminator meets Over the Top in 1986 Fists of Steel to more slasher stalker horror style versions such as The Vindicator and Class of 1999 School for Cyborgs that were inspirations for the Terminator as a whole, specifically John Carpenter's Halloween. Albert Pine had two attempts, Nemesis with Olivier Gruner in 1992 and the bigger hit with Jean-Claude Van Damme's Cyborg earlier in 1989. Even Murphy himself owes a debt to the impact of the cyborg assassin.
Thank you for your cooperation.
But this titanium tale of future AI domination, perfect killing machines, quickly struck a chord with a huge audience. Surprisingly, not for Arnie himself, who caused a 9-month delay on shooting due to Conan the Destroyer contractual commitments. Now, whilst making that movie, he was interviewed about his thoughts before shooting had started. He called it a few weeks' work on some shit B-movie. He chastised himself about this in his memoirs book, Total Recall, and that he quickly changed his mind after seeing the dailies. And it became one, if not the most famous character he portrayed. But as big as the Terminator was, T2 blew the cinema world apart and improved on everything, least of all budget. At just over $100 million, it was the most expensive movie ever made at that point, and in no small part due to the consortium of owners the IP had. Hemdale being paid off by Carolco, Gale Ann Hurd's divorce settlement from James Cameron at the time, the most expensive dollar ever, plus his director's fee. In total, a third of the movie's entire budget was spent before a foot of film was shot. Arnie's Gulfstream 3 private jet for his services was part of that receipt, but the groundbreaking special effects remain the lion's share. It personified the emerging big-budget, high-octane action CGI movie future we now get year to year. From the biggest band at the time, Guns N' Roses' You Could Be Mine hit, Stan Winston at his prosthetic best, ILM setting the visual bar yet again, and Arnie, Linda, Robert Patrick and James firing on all cylinders. It was, and remains, a cultural smash in pacing, action, authentic character development, devoted but fixated mother and a father and son story that stands as the pinnacle of the series, which has sadly fallen foul to the modern curse of oversaturation and erasure. Luckily, the UK developer Bitmap Bureau do hold T2 in the same high regard as many of us, and had decided to create a nostalgic passion and technical love note to those early 90s days. However, this celluloid to binary translation didn't always look such a surefire hit, back in the day.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hard to believe looking back at the film and forward to the new game, but it took an age for any games to appear. Even when the Terminator came out in 1984, well 85 in the UK, I always expected a game not to be far behind. A better movie to game candidate seemed hard to find. I mean, The Empire struck back only 2 years after the movie in 82, Indy raided the Ark, closely followed by E.T. Phoning Home, all three in the same year on the VCS. War games commenced on the ColecoVision in 84, The Last V8, aka Mad Max in 85 on the C64, Friday the 13th in 86, Robocop took just a year in 88 to hit arcades, 8 and 16-bit computers. Even Batman the Movie, the previous monster blockbuster before T2, landed on C64, Amiga, ST and more within months of the film's 89 release. Now, although Ocean were a huge reason for that, it still sets a precedent that didn't follow with the Terminator. In fact, the Terminator remained suspicious by its absence until T2 released in 1991. Then it was like buses, a flurry of T2 and the original Terminator games across the first half of the 90s in a future past barrage fitting of the plot. First-ish was Bethesda's 1991 The Terminator. Coinciding with T2's release, it shared similarities with Robocop 3 game from did and Ocean, which was in parallel development. Both used 3D worlds, open-ended design, a variety of things to do, and were early open-world games. It was a DOS game on PC, and it predominantly launched in the US. In fact, I never saw this game until many years later in the UK. I'm not even sure it ever had an official UK release, but if you do know, leave it in the comments below. Interestingly, you could play as either Kyle Reese saving Sarah or the Terminator to terminate Sarah across a fairly detailed downtown LA. It was impressive for the time and came about via the Hemdale IP ownership of the series being in transition. As is often true, these are broken down into various commodity-based commercial chunks, and game rights, movie rights, even story, actors, toys, etc. can be owned by different companies or individuals. See the modern-day equivalent in Spider-Man and Sony. Overall, it's an impressive time capsule for where 3D games were at the time, but it was a little bit beyond the PC capabilities being very slow and clunky, and overall Robocop 3 is a much better game. It's fun to play for short stints, but gets boring very quickly and doesn't have much variety. But for the day, it was still an impressive Terminator release. Ish.
I'll be back.